All right, welcome back, U.S. history students. By request, I have added in some theme music to this little video that we're about to watch on Woodrow Wilson and the Progressive Era. I have no idea if this is going to be too loud or distracting, but we're just going to try it out, and I'll get your feedback in class tomorrow. So again, we're talking about the Progressive Era. We've talked about Teddy Roosevelt's role in it. Now we're going to talk about this lovely gentleman here. So we have three presidents that are taking the oath of office during the Progressive Era. We have Teddy Roosevelt between 1901 and 1909. Talked all about him and the three C's and his efforts in trust busting. We have William Howard Taft, most famous for getting stuck in a bathtub. We'll talk a little bit about him today, but mostly we're going to focus in on this man here, Woodrow Wilson, president between 1913 and 1921, kind of signaling the end of the Progressive Era, and that's what we are going to be looking at for the majority of this video. So first about William H. Taft, president between Roosevelt and Wilson. He's not remembered for a whole lot. He only served one term in office. He wasn't really seen as being assertive enough. Teddy Roosevelt was that big, manly individual, and while William Howard Taft was big, he wasn't big in terms of politics. He was actually just very fat. He's most famous for getting stuck in a bathtub in the White House. But one thing that we don't really talk about is actually his efforts in busting up trusts. Roosevelt is called the trust buster. He broke up 40 during his presidency, but Taft took care of a ton of the rest of them that were still president and broke up 90 different trusts. So he really is the true trust buster. But what we need to know about him is he wasn't viewed as that great of a president, and he's just not someone that we focus a ton on during the Progressive Era, even though he did do a lot of great things. But the man we really want to focus on today is Woodrow Wilson. So after the Taft's first term in office, he was elected within the Progressive Party. The Progressives being, again, related to the Progressive Era. That's the political party that Taft belonged to. Teddy Roosevelt started his own political party called the Bull Moose Party. The two of them both side on what we would call modern-day Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt wanted to run for a third term in office. All right, I got to turn off the music. This is getting, I don't even know what this is. Autumn? No, that's what we just listened to. I have no idea what this is, but we're going to turn it off. It's getting distracting. Derek, this was a kind of good idea, but not the best. We'll see if we can work out a better way for this to happen. Come on, load. All right. So again, Woodrow Wilson wins the election. The Progressives, William Taft, and Teddy Roosevelt, who wanted to run for election again. We know today that presidents can only serve 2 terms, but at the time that was not a rule. Teddy Roosevelt had been out of office for 1 term after Taft and decided, you know what, Taft really kind of stunk at this. He didn't do enough. I'm going to run for president again, which caused a divide between people that are considered conservative. They fall on that end of the political spectrum, and the Progressives and the Bull Moose Party kind of fought it off. They fought it out. They split the vote, which gave the election to the Democrats in 1912. That doesn't mean that Woodrow Wilson didn't want to reform and carry on the Progressive Era, and he did a lot of that during his presidency, just kind of in a different way. He made big gains in political and economic reform. I'm still scared that this video isn't recording, so I'm going to check again. All right, we're good. We're good. We're still going. So Woodrow Wilson becomes president in 1912. He expanded upon the trust busting. Our first real action, even before Teddy Roosevelt, was in 1890. We passed something called the Sherman Antitrust Act, which began to attempt to break up these big monopolies, but it wasn't very effective because it didn't have a whole lot of rules attached to it. Woodrow Wilson passed and helped pass the Clayton Antitrust Act in 1914, which on top of putting in a bunch of regulations and guidelines for industries, made strikes legal, because up until this time, strikes are not legal. employees that go on strike are actually breaking the law, which is why they're so violently put down sometimes. And it also expanded the rights of labor unions. He also put in place the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, which is actually a whole government agency that made sure big businesses were following the rules. They had there were an organization that people could come to if they knew that businesses were practicing something illegal. And we have this big oversight, government oversight of big businesses. He also passed in 1916 the Working Man's Compensation Act, which provided financial relief for federal employees injured on the job. If you've ever heard of those commercials, Aflac, that stupid duck that talks about insurance, that's workman's comp insurance or compensation, meaning if you get hurt on the job and you got hurt doing something related to your job, you shouldn't have to just sit at home and not collect a check. You can still get some sort of money for it. This is the precursor, the Working Man's Compensation Act, that people should be protected, that if you get injured, your employer can't just fire you and you're left without a job. You deserve some sort of monetary relief during that time. He also did a lot to reform the tax system. He helped pass in 1913 the Underwood Act, which began to reduce tariffs, meaning taxes on foreign goods, across the country. It's also a huge part in passing the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which created a federal income tax based on how much money you make every single year. Now, this was a strange idea because we have this act that is reducing government money. Governments need money to function. They use tariffs, meaning taxes on trade and other goods, to make that money. We need to make up that money somehow, so that's why we passed the 16th Amendment to create federal income tax and tax people based on their jobs. And we didn't know if this was going to work or not. Nobody really fully understood whether it was going to be successful or not, but the government realized that this is going to be their new cash cow. The government makes a ton of money now off of income tax, which they use in turn to spend on us. It's a huge part of the federal budget today. We have the Federal Reserve put in place to help regulate banks and help control the money flow and supply in this country. The Federal Reserve is what we call the bank's bank. You don't really need to know the inner workings of it, but just know that Woodrow Wilson did a lot in order to help create this to stabilize our banking system, which is going to come into play hugely in our next two units. We also have the 17th Amendment being passed, which is really instrumental in giving voters and people a voice. So up until this time, senators in the United States Senate were not elected just based on the votes of people. They were chosen by state governments or state legislatures to choose the senators for each state. Every state has 2 senators, and it's a big deal. You're a big part of the federal government if you are a senator. The 17th Amendment was passed in 1912, in part by efforts on behalf of Woodrow Wilson to give that vote to the people, meaning they got the popular vote in this case. Senators were now directly elected by citizens, not by the state government that got to pick and choose who they wanted to be a senator. It gives people a whole lot more control and voice over a big part of their government. Senators have a big role. They help pass legislation that can benefit their states. They help pass other legislation that goes national, and it also makes the federal government more in touch with the people. If now you're voting for senators as opposed to like just the president, that makes it much more responsive to the needs of the people. So the 17th Amendment was a big deal. We also have another huge movement going on during Woodrow Wilson's presidency that we call the temperance and suffrage movement. The temperance movement focused on actually the banning of alcohol in this country, which happened in 1919 when we passed the 18th Amendment. Now, there are many reasons for the temperance movement. We'll talk about it a little bit more in class, but it's going to play a huge role in our next unit. But just know that in 1919, in order to try and regulate the morals and values of this country, the temperance movement helped passed the 18th Amendment, which banned the sale, production, and consumption of alcohol. Um, Also, that same year, women actually got the right to vote. The 19th Amendment was passed in 1919, really on behalf of women like Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Catt, and they fought for the right for women to vote. Good afternoon, Metro. Can I have your attention, please? Got interrupted by the Gritzmacher on that one. Sorry, guys. So we were talking about the suffrage movement. Imagine this. Up until the year 1919, half of the country's people could not vote on any of their political leaders. It's pretty crazy to think about. Women did not have the right to vote. Women haven't even had the right to vote for 100 years yet. We're approaching that 100-year anniversary in 2019. But it's pretty crazy to think that women cannot vote up until that point. That's a pretty progressive and reformist movement that's happening during this time. The fact that we're finally giving half of our country the right to make their own decisions and choose their own leaders. So that's another huge thing that's going on during this time. And we skipped the slide in class, but I want us to mention this guy here because it's going to be important really to the rest of our course in a way. We have this guy named Eugene V. Debs. He was a Labor Party leader who helped organize the American Railway Union. We know what a union is, and we kind of know why they are important. In 1901, he helped found the Socialist Party in the United States because of a reaction to these big businesses and the wealthy elite, which he saw as trying to keep down the common average working day man. That's the basic principle of socialism. If you don't know what socialism is, it's a system of the way society is set up where basically resources and wealth and jobs are shared amongst each other. No one person really has power over the other, and we have a lot of government control over pieces of the economy and in order to enable and ensure that everybody has equal access to things, that they all have the same resources, that they all have basically the same standards of living. It's a good idea in theory due to the fact that everybody is being provided for. And Eugene V. Debs saw this huge discrepancy and this huge disparate, this huge really gap between the rich and the poor, and tried to really start a socialist movement in the United States. He started running for political offices. He didn't really become very successful, but he started to get this idea of socialism into the working class American groups and kind of into the labor union movement, which is going to be really important for our next couple of units. So, all right, thanks for watching this one, guys. Be ready to work through a lot of this in class tomorrow.